The room was alive with conversation, a quiet energy flowing through the gathering. It was the kind of event where every detail seemed perfectly planned, every glance purposeful. But in an instant, all of that shifted. A faint ripping sound cut through the background noise, and a young girl, dressed for the occasion, froze in place. Her expression said it all: confusion, embarrassment, and a desperate hope that no one had noticed. But people had noticed. Eyes darted in her direction, and a hushed silence spread like a ripple. The laughter, the small talk, the clicking of cameras, it all stopped. She tried to recover, clutching at her dress, but there was no undoing what had happened. For her, it must have felt like the longest moment of her life. Among the crowd, there were a few awkward glances, some averted their eyes, unsure of how to respond. Others whispered, their voices just low enough to be indistinct but loud enough to remind her she was the center of attention. It was a moment where you'd expect someone to turn away, to pretend it wasn't their problem. Then, he moved. Quietly, deliberately, Barron Trump stepped forward. No grand gestures, no dramatic entrance. He simply walked toward her, his demeanor steady, his intentions clear. There was no hesitation, no waiting to see how others would respond. He slipped off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders, shielding her from the stares of the room. The girl's shoulders, once rigid with tension, began to relax. She glanced at him, her expression shifting from panic to gratitude. He said something to her, too low for the rest of the room to hear, but whatever it was enough to bring a faint, nervous smile to her face. In those few seconds, the atmosphere in the room changed. The murmurs faded. The attention shifted from the accident to the quiet dignity of his actions. It wasn't just the kindness of the gesture, it was the way he handled it, without fanfare, without making it about himself. Moments like these don't need long explanations. They don't need overanalysis. What happened next speaks volumes, but for now, take a moment to consider this: how often do we witness someone step forward when it's easiest to look away? If you've ever seen a moment like this or experienced something similar, let us know in the comments. And while you're here, make sure to like this video and subscribe. There's more to this story, and it's one you'll want to hear to the very end. Just as Barron stepped back, the girl's parents approached, their concern evident. They hadn't noticed the initial mishap, but now they saw their daughter's relieved expression and the jacket gently resting on her shoulders. Barron spoke with them briefly, his tone respectful and understated. Around them, the mood began to shift. Inspired by Barron's quiet gesture, other guests started to offer their support. One person brought over a shawl, another offered reassuring words. What began as an embarrassing moment was transforming into a collective display of kindness. Even the media, always alert for a headline, seemed to pause. Cameras that might have captured an unfortunate scene instead recorded acts of empathy. Reporters whispered among themselves, perhaps recognizing that something genuine was unfolding. The girl, no longer the focus of uncomfortable attention, began to relax. A tentative smile appeared, and she stood a little straighter. Her initial embarrassment was giving way to a sense of belonging. Her parents expressed their heartfelt thanks to Barron, who simply nodded, not seeking any praise. As the evening progressed, conversations changed. Guests spoke not about the mishap, but about the grace with which it was handled. Barron's actions became a quiet highlight, a reminder of the impact one person can have on those around them. This incident invites reflection. How often do we have the chance to ease someone else's discomfort? Do we step forward when the moment calls for it? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever witnessed or experienced a simple act of kindness that made a significant difference? Share your stories in the comments below. If this narrative resonates with you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more stories that touch the heart. As the event drew to a close, the girl and her family prepared to leave. Before they did, she approached Barron once more. With genuine gratitude, she thanked him, her eyes reflecting relief and appreciation. He offered a warm smile in return, and with that, they parted ways. Barron returned to his family, blending back into the gathering. He didn't seek recognition or applause. For him, it was simply the right thing to do. As the girl moved across the room, her knitted skirt snagged on the edge of a chair without her noticing. Step by step, the delicate fabric began to pull apart. It wasn't until she was halfway across the room that the situation became painfully obvious. A murmur began to spread among the guests. Some people turned their heads, trying to pretend they hadn't seen it, while others exchanged uneasy glances. A few stifled nervous laughter, unsure how to react. The girl's steps faltered, and she froze as she realized what was happening. Her hands darted to her sides in a futile attempt to fix the unraveling thread. Her cheeks turned bright red, and for a moment, she looked utterly lost. It wasn't just the wardrobe malfunction that had her shaken, it was the overwhelming realization that everyone was watching. Moments like these are rare and uncomfortable, where time seems to slow, and every second feels like an eternity. People around her didn't know what to do. Would someone step in? Or would they simply continue to watch from a distance? Just as the awkward buzz of whispers started to grow louder, Barron Trump's gaze shifted to the girl. He noticed her distress immediately. While others hesitated, unsure of how to handle the situation, he acted. There was no hesitation in his movements, no need to gauge the reactions of those around him. He walked toward her with quiet confidence, removing his blazer as he approached. With a calm gesture, he placed it over her shoulders, shielding her from further embarrassment. It wasn't dramatic or attention-seeking, just a simple act of understanding and care. The girl looked up at him, her expression a mix of surprise and gratitude. Her shoulders, which had been tense with humiliation, began to relax. For a moment, the noise in the room seemed to fade. Whatever he whispered to her was private, meant only to reassure, but it brought a faint smile to her face. These are the kinds of moments that make you wonder, how would you react if faced with a similar situation? Would you step in, or would you hesitate, unsure of what to do? Barron reached the girl without drawing unnecessary attention, his steps deliberate and composed. He slipped his jacket from his shoulders and gently placed it around her, shielding her from the gazes that had grown heavier with each passing moment. The action wasn't rushed or awkward, it carried a quiet confidence that immediately set a different tone. He leaned in slightly, speaking just loud enough for her to hear. "It's okay," he said softly, his voice steady and kind. "Don't worry. Let's get this sorted out." His words were simple, but in that moment, they carried more weight than anything else in the room. The girl's shoulders began to ease, her grip on her skirt loosening as she realized she wasn't alone in facing this. She glanced up at him, her eyes a mix of gratitude and surprise. It wasn't just the gesture that mattered, it was the way he handled it, as if it were the most natural thing in the world to step in and help. Around them, the atmosphere shifted. Guests who had been unsure of how to react now found themselves inspired by his quiet leadership. Conversations paused, not out of awkwardness but out of respect for what they were witnessing. What made this moment so striking wasn't just Barron's action, it was the composure he maintained throughout. He didn't make it about himself or seek acknowledgement. His focus was entirely on helping the girl regain her confidence, not on how others might perceive him. The murmurs that had once filled the room faded into an appreciative quiet. Those who had been unsure of how to help began to step forward, offering small acts of kindness, an extra scarf, a reassuring word. It was as though Barron's calm response had set a standard for how to handle a delicate situation with dignity. This begs the question, how many of us would act so instinctively in a moment like this? What does it take to respond not with hesitation but with quiet determination? If you've ever been in a position where someone's small but significant action changed everything for you, share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear about the moments that restored your faith in humanity. As Barron stepped back, the tension in the room seemed to ease. The nervous laughter that had briefly rippled through the crowd stopped entirely, replaced by an almost palpable sense of admiration. People who moments earlier had been unsure of how to react now looked at Barron, their expressions reflecting respect for what he had just done. The girl, now wrapped in his jacket, stood a little taller, her earlier embarrassment fading into a quiet confidence. Her parents approached quickly, their concern evident, but they paused for a moment to exchange a grateful glance with Barron. His calm actions had not only helped their daughter but also brought dignity back to an otherwise uncomfortable situation. Then, something remarkable happened. Inspired by Barron's gesture, others in the crowd began to step forward. A woman handed the girl a scarf she had been wearing, while another offered words of reassurance to her parents. The once-watching audience transformed into a community of supporters, each contributing in small but meaningful ways. It wasn't about grand gestures or trying to outshine one another. These acts were simple and sincere, motivated by a desire to follow the example set by a young man who had acted without hesitation. The room, which had been buzzing with uncertainty, now carried a sense of unity. Moments like this remind us that kindness and empathy can break through even the most rigid social settings. It's a reminder that no matter who you are or where you come from, an act of care can bridge differences and inspire others to do the same. If you were in that room, how would you have reacted? Would you have been one of those who stepped forward, or would you have hesitated, unsure of what to do? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. The girl stood quietly for a moment, adjusting the jacket draped over her shoulders. Her nervous expression softened into a genuine smile, her relief evident as she glanced toward Barron. A quiet thank you escaped her lips, her gratitude unmistakable. He responded with a small nod, his demeanor remaining calm and unassuming. There was no effort to prolong the interaction or draw attention to himself. Barron turned and walked back to his seat with the same quiet confidence that had defined his actions from the beginning. While others might have basked in the moment or sought acknowledgement, he chose to let the moment speak for itself. It was a gesture of care, not performance, and that made all the difference. As the evening continued, guests whispered among themselves, not about the mishap but about how it had been resolved. Some discreetly reached for their phones, capturing snippets of the scene to share with others. Within hours, posts began to surface on social media, recounting the event in awe of Barron's composed response. The story, initially a fleeting moment in a crowded room, began to take on a life of its own. The comments pouring in were filled with admiration, not only for what he had done but for the manner in which he had done it. People across platforms expressed their thoughts. A simple act of kindness speaks volumes. In a world where it's easy to stand by, he chose to act. The story resonated not because it was dramatic but because it was relatable. Everyone has experienced a moment of vulnerability, a time when they hoped someone would step in. Barron's response reminded people of the importance of those seemingly small decisions, moments when empathy becomes action. Now, imagine being in his shoes. Would you have stepped forward, or would hesitation have held you back? These are the moments that define character, not in grand speeches but in simple, deliberate choices. This story reminds us that acts of compassion, no matter how small, have the power to reach far beyond the moment. They inspire others, create connections, and leave lasting impressions. What do you think about this moment? Have you ever been part of an experience where someone's kindness changed the course of the day? As the night unfolded, the moment faded into the background of the evening's activities, but its impact lingered in the minds of those who had witnessed it. It wasn't just a story of a quick gesture, it was a reminder of the quiet strength in choosing to act when it matters. The girl, once overwhelmed by embarrassment, left the event with her head held high, supported not just by Barron's kindness but by the collective empathy that his actions had sparked. In a world where attention often gravitates toward spectacle and controversy, this story stands out for its simplicity and authenticity. It highlights the strength in showing up for others, not for recognition but because it's the right thing to do. Now, pause for a moment and reflect. How would you have handled a similar situation? Would you have had the presence of mind to act without hesitation, or might you have watched from a distance, unsure of what to do? These are the questions that define us, not in grand moments but in the quiet ones that ask us to choose between action and inaction. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever witnessed or been part of a moment where a small act of kindness left a lasting impression? We'd love to hear your stories and how they've shaped your perspective. If this story moved you, take a second to like this video and subscribe to our channel. By doing so, you're helping us share more stories that remind us of the good we're all capable of. As we close, remember this: empathy doesn't require fanfare. It doesn't need grand gestures. Sometimes, it's the quiet moments of care and presence that leave the deepest marks on the people around us. Until next time, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in the next story.